All right, well, I think a few more people will be joining shortly, but why don't we just jump right in and get started. Super excited to host the 2021 Iron Viz winner, Lisa Trescott, today. Super honored that she's joining us, and excited to learn a little bit more about her background, and she's going to dive into some cool dashboard UI that she leverages quite often, and walk us through how she uses buttons, toggles, and dropdowns. So our agenda today, we're just going to have a brief introduction. We're going to talk about CTUG a little bit, talk about how people can become designers in the future or be more involved. And then we're going to have a quick Q&A with Lisa. She's going to walk through her presentation. And then we have a hands-on session just at the very end where Lisa is going to bounce around between a few different breakout rooms, and she'll help with any questions or talk through any key bits of feedback that you all learned throughout today's presentation. All right, so who we are. So CTUG. CTUG's been around for a number of years. We're focused right now on hosting quarterly meetups. We're keeping them virtual until hopefully COVID dies back down and we can gather together in person again. We host a number of different topics, and we try and keep the content as varied as possible. Super lucky to host people that have had a wide range of experience in the BI industry, like Lisa. And you know, we'll also focus on new key technologies that integrate well with Tableau, to industry focus, breakout groups, you name it. So we're always trying to think of something that is engaging and exciting and relevant to what people are focused on today. And always open for feedback too. So at the end of this meeting, if you're interested in being a presenter or being involved at all, please reach out, and happy to get you in the loop. And who the audience is. So all levels and all industries. We're focused on the Seattle region, and we have everyone from new first-time Tableau users to seasoned vets that are looking to network and gain tips and tricks from our various presenters. So Solve is the key sponsor for CTUG. And I'm Carl Johnson, and I'm a consultant at Solve. I work on the data and analytics team. And we've been supporting CTUG for a little while now. And so what we do, Solve is a purpose-driven consulting firm. Our largest portion of our business is in management consulting, but we have a large practice in Seattle that focuses on data and analytics. We're now up to 80 people, and we do a lot of work with Tableau. So we're 7-time Tableau Partner of the Year, and yeah, really excited to keep expanding that partnership and work on cutting edge strategic projects with our clients in the area. And yeah, super excited about working at Slom and the work we do and the people we get to work with. We're also hiring. So if you're interested in looking into consulting, if that's ever been on your radar or it could be in the future, please reach out. All different levels in our DNA practice are currently available, from our Consulting Foundations program that is an intro program for people making the jump into consulting, to seasoned consultants, to senior leaders. So there's my email. I'll send this deck out afterwards as well. And please reach out if you want to connect. So keep in touch. So we have a number of different avenues where you can keep in touch with what's upcoming with CTUG. There's the Seattle Tableau user group page on LinkedIn. That is the most commonly updated place, and I would suggest that everyone start there. There's also a user group hub where when we create new meetings, we'll post them, and you can go through the RSVP process and connect. There is a Twitter and there's a Facebook page, and we will be focusing on broadening our reach through those avenues in the upcoming weeks. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're ever interested in presenting at a future CTUG or have an awesome topic that you think that the audience could benefit from, please reach out. We're always looking for new ideas and new people that want to be involved. All right, now to our presenter for today. So super excited that Lisa Trescott is joining us. She is the 2021 Iron Viz winner. Iron Viz, as I'm sure many of you know, is the competition for Tableau, and it brings together, a bunch of Tableau expert users that face off in a cutting edge competition. And Lisa edged out the field this year, and super excited to hear more about her journey and how she got there and her experience in Iron Viz. For her day job, she works as a research analyst at Miracosta College, and she focuses on the college's student equity and achievement programs. She's been using Tableau for 4.5 years and has actually just recently become active in the Tableau community. And I think this is her first user group that she's presented at as well. First of many, I'm sure. But yeah, super excited that she's here. And to kick things off, we have just a few questions that we'll just ask her about her journey. And at the end here, just like I mentioned to start, there's an opportunity for people to ask questions. You name it, about her background. So let's jump right in. Lisa, could you just give us an overview of your career in data analytics and sort of how you started using Tableau, what that journey looked like, and how you progressed?
Sure. So first, thanks for having me. This is my first TUG presentation, so super excited to be here with all of you. In terms of how I got into analytics, it wasn't a super linear path. I majored in psychology in my undergrad, and I had every intent in becoming a therapist. So I actually went to a graduate program for marriage and family therapy and realized pretty quick that nope, that's not right. That's not what I meant to do. So I left that program after a semester and did a lot of research on kind of the research side of psychology and kind of what other avenues I could take to go that route, because I had found that, one of the classes that I had taken in that master's program was devoted to research in marriage and family therapy. And I was super excited by that. And I was really intrigued. So I decided to start looking into a more research-oriented path. And I ended up going back to school and got my master's in psych with an emphasis in research. And so that's really kind of what kind of got me on that path of going down a more research-oriented field. And after the master's program, I started working for a nonprofit and then a public organization doing program evaluation. So I was looking at the programs that they had set up and creating logic models for them to evaluate those programs. So see which parts of the program were working well, which parts needed to be changed, where they might want to allocate more resources and things like that. And I got to do a lot of quantitative and qualitative stuff through those positions. And then about 4.5 years ago now is when I transitioned into the role that I'm in now, which is in higher ed. So I work at Miracosta Community College as a research analyst. And like you said in the intro, I support our student equity programs and our different student services programs. And that's the job where I started learning Tableau. So I started learning it pretty much on the job. I was doing the Tableau free training videos and just kind of Googling stuff when I didn't know it and just finding out stuff that way. And it really was kind of an on the job learning experience because I had never even heard of Tableau before this job. I remember being in the interview and someone mentioned, oh, we recently acquired Tableau for data visualization. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And I just made a mental note to Google what that was after the interview. So it was my very first experience with it was my first day working at Miracosta.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing that. And it really is awesome to see that the sky's the limit with just the resources that everyone has access to. Thanks for walking us through your career path there. Could you talk a little bit about Iron Viz and how the competition came onto your radar, and then how you prepared for it as well?
Yeah, so it really only came onto my radar because I had recently joined Twitter. So I started becoming more active in the community around this time last year, and I very begrudgingly got a Twitter account. I did not super into social media, and I just didn't want to have another social media account, but I knew that there was a big community for Tableau on there and thought, okay, well, if I'm going to become more active and engage in this community and really start learning more, I knew I would need to kind of get on there. So I did. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have even really been aware that the feeder was open. Because before last year, I didn't even know really how people got to be on the stage at Iron Viz. I was just kind of like this totally mysterious process to me. So yeah, so if I hadn't been on social media, I wouldn't have even noticed that the feeder was open. When the feeder was announced, I had no intention of entering because I had kind of seen Iron Viz as like this, like only the Tableau gurus would be in Iron Viz, like, Zen masters and ambassadors and feature authors and people with visits of the day. And I didn't have any of those Tableau accolades. I was super green in the community. And I was like, well, that's not a contest for me. But then Sarah Bartlett had put this blog post together all about why everyone should enter Iron Viz because it's a great learning experience. You're going to meet people in the community. You're going to enhance your skills. And I thought that's so true. Like, that's the whole reason that I started becoming more active in the community. So why not? Like, what's the worst that could happen? And it turned out pretty good. It turned out pretty well in the end. And then in terms of how I prepared, as soon as I found out I was a finalist, I started learning Tableau Prep because that's not a tool that I have access to through work. And I had heard previous Iron Viz finalists mention how integral Tableau Prep had been to them in terms of being able to prep your data, clean it, structure it in the way you need for whatever charts you're going to build, and how it shaved off a lot of time. And so I knew that I would need to get a good handle on that tool. So I started learning that immediately. I went through a lot of the prep and data challenges. So that's one of the community projects that are out there devoted specifically to preparing data using Tableau Prep. And that was awesome. I feel like that really expedited how quickly I was able to learn it because all the challenges are different. And then they have little videos at the end to help you, like if you get stuck, to show you how to do it. So I did that. I reached out to some other finalists who had been, in the competition in the past, just for tips and tricks from them. And they gave a lot of really great insight and kind of just the mindset and the approach to take in terms of building it out. And then I also started learning a lot of Tableau shortcuts and hotkeys because I didn't use a lot of them. I wasn't sure that I could build a Viz in 20 minutes. And so I knew I needed to get faster. And so I started incorporating those a lot into my daily use of Tableau, just so they became a little bit more second nature. And so that was all before I got the data. Once we got it, it was just pedal to the metal. And we only had about 2.5 weeks to go through the data, craft our Viz, learn to build it in 20 minutes, and then ultimately film everything. So when that came around, it was kind of a mad dash, getting everything together. And then there was just a ton of practice behind the scenes. I probably ran through the build about 20 or more times, just trying to get faster and faster. The first time I did it, I was like 25, 26 minutes, which was not going to cut it. So I worked with my supervisor, Esther, who was fantastic. She helped me in a lot of places, give tips for areas to become faster or little things I could do to make the build process a little speedier. So she was great. So a lot of practice with that. And then a lot of practice on the presentation. So I had animation built into my final Viz, and I was kind of trying to narrate the chart. So it was really hard to get all of that synced up just right. It's like cutting things out left and right and restructuring everything. And then just a lot of practice before the actual filming.
That's super cool. Thanks for that backstory. Could you walk us through some of your favorite features of the dashboard and maybe some of the features in Tableau Prep as well that you leverage to put this together?
Yeah, so I think in the final build, my favorite feature is probably just the animation. I've never used the pages shelf before in Tableau before this. I just never really had a great use case for using it. And so it was just exciting to build that into a Viz and use it for the first time. I also think there's kind of, there's a little pressure in Iron Viz, or there's a lot of pressure, but there's a little pressure to kind of do something that has some flair to it, right? You want to put on a good show for everybody and do something that's going to, get them visually interested and excited, but you're also trying to tell a story. So you don't want things to get so complicated or just, putting flair in for the sake of flair that you lose that story. So I was always kind of trying to straddle that line. And I felt like, the animated piece, adding that motion really kind of gave me that flair without losing the story. So I feel like that was probably my favorite thing. I also really enjoyed embedding the Spotify links so that people could listen to the music that was making it onto the Shazam charts, because if there are people like me who are absolutely not musically inclined, I don't know anything about the music industry. I knew one of the songs in this viz before Iron Viz. So I thought, well, other people might be interested to actually hear this music too, since I didn't know what any of it was. So I really enjoyed incorporating that as well. I wasn't allowed to play it in the presentation for licensing rights. So that was kind of a bummer, but I like having that functionality in there.
That's super cool. Yeah, it's an amazing dashboard. It's really cool exploring it. Are there any questions from the audience? Before we jump in, we probably have time for 1 or 2 quick ones. All right, well, why don't I just hand it over to you, Lisa? I'll stop sharing and yeah, let's dive right in. Thanks so much.
All right, can you all see that okay? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to be talking to you all today about how you can enhance the user interface of your dashboards by leveraging parameter actions. I'm mildly obsessed with parameter actions. You'll see a lot of examples of that in my Tableau public profile, but where I really go to town with parameter actions is in my work dashboards. And I think that's because by adding in some of these parameter actions and user interface elements, you can make your dashboards a lot more intuitive for your users. And just by adding that interactivity, you get things to be a little bit more engaging. And then when people are engaged and they want to interact with it, they're going to use your dashboards more. So I'm really into incorporating parameter actions just to really enhance that user interface in my work dashboards, especially. So just a kind of high level overview, anyone could do an entire presentation on UI. I'm going to give you like a 1-minute overview. Essentially, UI stands for user interface. And really all that means is how is a user interacting with the content that's on their screen? So how are you navigating a website? How are you getting through a dashboard? How are you, using your phone or a tablet? It's kind of all of those little navigational touch points that you see, in a dashboard or on a website. It's, drop downs. It's, how are you getting from point A to point B with the screen content? And so just a couple of examples of what UI elements are. You have things like buttons, drop-down menus. You have toggle switches to turn things on and off. You have things like accordion menus where you select, a top level menu and a smaller menu will pop out. You have breadcrumbs, so oh, if I need to go back to, account on this website, I just click this button. You have carousels, so if, depending on which circle here is highlighted, the content on your screen will change. You have side panel navigation, so clicking, these different text fields will change again the content on your screen. So these are not all of the examples of UI elements, but they're some of my favorite ones to put into dashboards because they are pretty universal. So when people see things like this, they know intuitively what to do with them, right? I would be willing to guess the first time you turned the alarm on and off on your phone and you saw a toggle switch, you knew what to do without anyone telling you, right? Oh, I hit this toggle, it's going to turn on. And if I hit it again, it's going to turn off. So I like to incorporate these because they do make that interface so much more intuitive because people don't need instructions on how to navigate these elements because they are so universal. So I'm going to focus on 3 of these today. The first one is going to be drop-down menus. And you're probably thinking, well, Tableau gives me default drop-down menus. Why would I need to make one? And that's true. I'm going to show you how to make a custom one that's just a little bit more stylized. It'll give a little more flair to your dashboard and make things just a little more aesthetically pleasing. So I'll show you how to do a custom drop-down. I'll show you how to do a toggle switch. So we had a very problematic grade come about during the pandemic. We're going to flip that on and off in our data set today. And then once I walk you through the steps to build out those 2 elements, that's when we're going to turn it over to the hands-on portion and we'll do the breakout rooms. And you all are going to build out the side panel navigation and I'll come around and I'll help and I'll give instructions and stuff at that time, but we'll get to that. So all of these are built you can build them with parameters and parameter actions. And so hopefully a review of parameters is, a parameter is basically just a universal value that you put into your workbook. So it's not tied to your data set. And then it allows your user to change a view using that parameter. So it gives a little bit more control to your user in terms of what they want to see. So it changes a static chart into something that's a little bit more dynamic for your user. So whenever you create a parameter, there's basically two steps. And the first one is to create it. So when you create a parameter, you set the data type. So it's tied to a data type, just like all of your variables are. So it can be string, date, numeric, float, anything like that. So you set the data type, and then you tell Tableau what values you can allow in that parameter or to be used in that parameter. So it could be a date range, it could be a range of numbers, it could be a list of string values. So you tell Tableau, these are the values that the user can use when they're using this parameter. And then via the parameter, a user will change the input to one of those values. And then you could create parameters all day long, but you also have to tell Tableau what to do with them or they're not going to do anything. So all the parameters that we use today are going to be used in calculated fields, but you can also use them in reference lines or top end filters or things like that. You have to tell Tableau, this is how this parameter is going to function in this dashboard. Otherwise, it won't do anything. So today's presentation is not super focused on the parameter piece. We're going to focus more on the actions and adding those user interface elements. So you'll see when we get to the demonstration, I've already built out a dashboard that has these parameters and a lot of the calculated fields already built out. Again, because I had to do that to build a dashboard that would be influenced by our actions that we set up. But I will kind of go through briefly just to show you what I did, but that won't be the main focus today. Instead, we're going to focus mostly on the action piece, like I said. So parameter actions allow your user to change the input value of those parameters that you've created by interacting with the viz itself. So instead of using those default drop-down menus that Tableau provides, you can then have a user click on a button, click a button or click a data point or hover over something, and that will automatically change the input to the parameter. And that's the kind of the beauty of actions. It adds a new level of interactivity. And so when you create a parameter action, you need a couple of things. You need a source sheet. So this is the sheet that's going to control the parameter. So we're going to build out a bunch of source sheets today that are going to look like UI elements. And that's what's going to control these parameter actions. Excuse me. We also need to tell Tableau the user behavior that's going to control the action. So whether it be hover or select or menu, all of ours today are going to be select just because I find clicking buttons is very intuitive. So I tend to use select most of the time, but you can select other user behaviors as well. And then you need the target parameter. So these are those parameters that I was just talking about that they're already built out in the dashboard or in the workbook. But you'll need a parameter that's actually going to be controlled by the action. And then you need a source field. So this is essentially the field that kind of feeds into your parameter. And it's the field that you're going to have to put into your viz in some way to make sure that the action will run. If it's not in your viz, you're not going to be able to run a parameter action. And so I'm going to show you kind of the end product that we're going for today. And just a reminder, I work in higher ed. So this is an example of data that we might see in higher ed. None of it's from my college. I made all this data up and generated it through Mockaroo, which is a website that allows you to create fake data. But we're going to look at course success and course retention rates. Basically what that means, course success is the student got an A, B, or C in the class, so they passed it. Retention is they just stayed in the class and they didn't withdraw from it. So this is going to be our end product. I'm going to show you how to create this dropdown in the top left where you pop out the drop-down menu and then a user can select the academic year we're looking at. I'll show you how to bring in that problematic gray that I was talking about with that toggle button in the top right. And then you all are going to build out this side panel navigation here to switch the content between course success and course retention. So this is what we're going to build out today that I'm going to show you how to do. And if you want, you can go out to my Tableau public profile. I put two versions of this dashboard out there. One is a hands-on version and you'll see this does not have that side panel navigation built out yet. So this is the one I would suggest you download, and I can copy paste this link into the chat. But there is a final version that has that side panel on it as well. So that's going to have spoilers in it. So if you want to do the hands-on piece without kind of being influenced or seeing how it's done beforehand, I would recommend downloading this hands-on version. I will put that into the chat right now, so you all can go out and grab it. And before I jump into the actual demonstration, I just want to check in, make sure there aren't any questions going off in the chat. I'm really bad at monitoring that as I present. So if there's anything that people need answered now before we go into the demo, we can answer that now. Oh, Carl already put this in the chat. See, I told you I can't monitor and present.
I think we're all good, Lisa. Thanks so much.
Okay, perfect. So the very first piece we're going to build out is this drop-down piece. So we're essentially going to build out a viz that looks like a drop-down menu that the user can select and select the academic year here. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a new sheet and make sure we're on the right data set. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring in academic year and just throw it onto rows, and I'll make it a whole view so you can see it. And then what I want to do is I'm basically going to build out a faux bar chart so that I can have a mark that I can change the color, right? So I want to be able to change the highlighted color here behind the selected academic year. So to do that, I'm going to go up to columns and I'm going to type in min of 1. And so what this is going to do is it's going to create a mark for every single academic year at 1. And Tableau is going to default to do a bar chart, which is exactly what we want. So now we have essentially a mark that we can color code. And I'm going to change the axis here. So it runs from 0 to 2. We want that bar to fill up the whole chart. So I'm going to change the axis. And I'm just going to fix it with an endpoint of 1. So it'll take up that whole view. I'm also going to throw academic year onto label, and it's going to throw it over here on the right-hand side. So we'll just change the alignment to be left oriented, and we'll bring up the size a little bit so people can see it, and I'll make it Tableau medium. So you can see now we've got basically a bar chart with all of our labels on it. And then we want to add that color coding piece. So at this point is when we would need to create that parameter. I've already created it, but I'm going to show you how I did it because I think the easiest way to create a parameter when you're going to use all of the available values for a specific dimension, the easiest way to create that parameter is to hover over that pill, right click, and go down to create parameter. And when you do that, Tableau is going to automatically create the parameter for you. It's going to name it. It's going to set your data type. So we want it to be string because this is a string data type. And it's going to put all those allowable values in there for you. So this is what we want. We want the user to be able to select any academic year in our data set. So I'm not going to save this again because I already created this. And then we need a variable to put onto color. And so the one that I'm going to use is this one over here. Again, it's already created. But basically all it's saying is, does this academic year that's in my data, this variable, does that equal the parameter that I just created? And if it does, we're going to get a value returned of true. And if it doesn't, we're going to get a value returned of false. And so that's what we want. We just want true, false to know whether or not it's what's selected in the parameter. I'll also note that anytime I create a calculated field that includes a parameter, I just put a P dot in front of it. That's my own naming convention to just alert myself, hey, this calculated field has a parameter involved in it. I've seen people do tons of other stuff. So you use whatever nomenclature works for you. That's just kind of how I signal to myself and stay organized once I start getting tons of calculations in a workbook. So I'm going to throw that field onto color, and I'm going to show you the academic year parameter. And you can see that the year that's selected is 1920, and we're getting a true value just for that year, right? So, and if I change the input for the parameter to a different year, it's going to change the color coding to be whatever I have selected. So we're starting to get there, but this is not the color coding that I want at all. So we're going to change that. We'll just go into color and edit your colors. And I'm going to double click on true. And I save that kind of tealish color over here in my custom colors, and we'll click OK. And we'll do the same thing for false, but I'm going to make false white so it looks like it's just not selected. And now we're getting closer to what we want in the end. Oops, I didn't actually change it. So you can see when you change it, now the highlighted color is that teal color. So we're going to do a little bit of formatting. We're just going to clean it up a little bit. We're going to turn the header off. I'm going to turn the header for the axis off. And you might not be able to see it. We've got axis rulers and 0 lines here. So I'm just going to take those off as well by right-clicking and formatting and removing those. So we get a nice clean viz without any lines on it. And I'm going to do one other thing that's going to make 0 sense right now. Like you'll see why I'm doing it once we get to that point in the build. I'm going to create 2 dummy variables. So I should say, okay, my favorite hotkey, I learned this throughout the Iron Viz process, is Alt-AC. It just automatically brings up the calculated field window. And so now I can't stop using it. I can't build a calculated field any other way. So that's a really great hotkey to learn and kind of internalize. But I'm just going to build a dummy calc that says dummy 0. And all it's going to be is an open quotation mark, a 0, and a close quotation mark. And that's it. And we're going to build a very similar one, and we're going to call it dummy 1. Same exact thing. It's just a 1 in quotation mark. You don't have to use 0 and 1. You can use A and B, X and Y. You could use true, false. You could put literally any string value you want in here. It just has to be a different string than what's in your other dummy variable. And again, I realize none of this makes any sense right now. I'll explain why we're doing this when we get to that point in the build. So I'm going to bring these both onto detail. And I'm also going to turn the tooltip off. I don't really want those for this. Now, before I put this onto the dashboard and start building it out, I do want to show you one other thing. All of these vizzes have a filter on them already, which is that academic year field that we built out to say, does this equal the selected field in the parameter? And so they're all just filtered to true. So that's what's allowing the parameter to control these other sheets in our dashboard. Okay, so we're going to build this out. And what I want it to end up looking like is this. I want to have essentially a little text box here that has the selected academic year. And I want to be able to click on it and have that drop down pop out. So I'm going to bring a text object onto the dashboard. Notice my dashboard right now is tiled. If I drag this out, Tableau is going to try to tile this as well. If I hit shift, it'll allow me to temporarily move to a floating. I just want to float this one object, and then I drop it, and now we've got one floating object, and I didn't have to go back and forth between, changing tiled and floating. So I'm going to type AY here, and then I'm going to go over here to insert. If you'll remember in the presentation, I mentioned parameters are universal, so they are not tied to a specific data source, meaning you can use them anywhere. So that's one of the beauties of them being so universal and not tied down to a specific data source, because you can pipe them into your text boxes everywhere throughout your workbook. So let's make this a little bit bigger so that folks can see it. We'll click OK. And I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so it looks about the size of the drop-down menu. And I'm going to change the background color. So I'm going to change the background color to be the color of the dashboard. So if I just go down here and I select more colors, this is something that I didn't know was in Tableau for an embarrassingly long amount of time. If you hit this pick screen color, Tableau will temporarily turn to a little eyedropper, and you can just hover over anything, even outside of Tableau. If I go to my second screen over here on the right, you can see the color is changing based on whatever I'm hovering over. So it's a super fast way to select a new color if you have something already in your dashboard or something on your screen that you want to eyedrop. So we'll click that and click OK, and now we've got this kind of grayish button looking thing. So I want to mention as well, I'm purposely keeping the formatting pretty simplistic for this because I want you to see that you don't have to do a ton of external design work in order to add a lot of these elements to your dashboard. You can absolutely go into another design tool and create a very stylized drop-down looking button if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You can do all of this stuff with pretty simple design things and mostly within Tableau. Okay, so now we're going to, oh, you know what? I didn't name this sheet. Let's name it just to keep ourselves organized. I'm going to bring the drop-down list out. And again, I'm going to hit shift just so it's temporarily floating there. And we'll drop it and we'll turn our title off and we'll resize it so it's about the size of our button. And I'm also just going to add a border so it pops a little bit against this white background. And at this point, I want this to be able to pop open and close when the user selects the button up here. So if you go to this little caret right here and go down to add ShowHide Button, you're going to get the functionality to basically open and close this, this sheet. If you're in a version of Tableau of, I think it's 2021.2 or before that, this functionality was only available on floating containers. I think it was 2021.2 where they added that functionality to every dashboard object. So if you're in an older version of Tableau, you're going to have to put your sheet into a floating container before you have this option. But that's simple enough to do if you just grab a floating container and then tile this into it, you'll have basically the exact same functionality that we have without the container. So you can do that if you're in an older version. So go ahead and add that ShowHide button, and Tableau is just going to default to putting their little X mark on it. And I'm going to bring it out and I'm going to make it the size of that text box that we added. Now, what I want is for there to be a little arrow over here that pops, goes up or down depending on whether the container, whether the sheet is open or closed. And I want it to basically fit over that whole text box. So what I did was within PowerPoint, so again, no fancy design tools, I took a rectangle and I just made it about the size of that button, and I added a triangle to it, and I'll change the color so you can see it. And then I want this rectangle to be see-through. So what I'm going to do is go up to shape fill and change it to no fill and no outline. And it's going to look like there's nothing there. But if you hit Control A, you select everything, you'll see that there is actually a rectangle there. It's just see-through now. It's a transparent rectangle, which is what I want. I want you to be able to see through what's, I want you to see the text that's behind the rectangle. So if you select it all and right click and then save it as a picture, and then just rotate your triangle around, select it all, right click, save as picture, you're going to have those two drop-down menus with the up and down arrows on them. So I made some that match the colors of our dashboard already. So I'm just going to change the, I'm going to edit the button and use those for the item shown and hidden. So when it's shown like it is right now, we want there to be an arrow pointing up. So I'm going to choose that option. I got my drop down up. And then when it's hidden, I want an arrow pointing down to show that you need to click to open it. So we'll choose the drop down for that. And now we've got a little triangle button that when you click on it, you've got your drop down opening and closing, and you can see the text behind it because we use that transparent shape. At this point, we're almost there, but the main functionality of actually clicking on these things isn't doing anything. So we have to wire up that parameter action that I was talking about. So we're going to go up here to dashboard and actions, and we're going to choose the add action option for change parameter. And let's go ahead and name this. We'll call it select AY for select academic year. And I'm going to Control A in here so I select everything and then hit the check mark so I'm not selecting anything. The source sheet that I want is that drop-down list that we just created. This is what I want to control the parameter. I want it to run on select. So when a user clicks the year, I want the year to change. And the parameter that I want it to influence is the academic year parameter. Then that source field, that field that feeds into the parameter is academic year. And then we're going to hit OK and OK. And what you're going to see is now when we select the year, it's changing in our dashboard. I also got these extra things that came in. Something else you probably noticed though is we've got this really gross highlighting going on. And I don't want that, right? When I click this, I don't want everything else to be shaded. I want it when you click it to everything else just turn white, like the color that we coded it. So this is where those mysterious dummy calculations are going to come into play. So we're going to go back and add another action, but this one's going to be a filter action. So don't go to change parameter, you want to go to filter. And we'll call this deselect AY. And again, we're going to just select all of these and make sure that only our drop-down list is selected. We're going to run this action on select. And because this is a filter action that we really only want to affect the drop-down list, we're going to change our target sheet. Tableau is going to suggest that you use the entire dashboard. We don't want that. We just want to use the drop-down list. And then it's super important that you select this show all values when the filter is cleared, because if you don't, all of your values from your drop-down are going to vanish. So it's going to clear the filter and it's going to clear all of your values from that. And then this is where those dummies are coming in. We're going to go to selected fields and we're going to select dummy 0. We want dummy 0 to filter dummy 1. So what the heck is this doing? This is a major hack with Tableau. Basically what we are doing is we're setting up a filter action where 0 is going to filter 1, and those two things will never equal each other. So this filter is not going to do anything in terms of filtering. Really all it's doing is kind of resetting the viz. So every time you click, it takes that highlight away. So it's kind of like a fun little hack. And now when you click on it, you don't get that gross highlight anymore. It's got the functionality and the UI that we want to see. So that's where all those very mysterious dummy calcs are coming into play. And that is the drop-down menu. Before I move on to the next piece, I just want to check in and make sure I haven't lost anyone or make sure there aren't any questions that I haven't seen in the chat. And I don't see any. Okay, so we're going to move on to the toggle menu. So just a little context as to why we're about to do what we're going to do. We have a grade at my college called an excused withdrawal. It's basically like a do-over grade. So if a student drops a class and it's because they had some extenuating circumstance, let's say they had a family emergency, or maybe they were in a car accident, or they had something that happened where they had to drop the class for some kind of external circumstance. Typically, when a student drops a class, they get a W for withdrawal, and it's a failing grade. If the student comes to us and says, hey, I had this thing happen, I think it should be excused, we'll give them an excused withdrawal, and it's like the course never happened. It just disappears from their record. It doesn't go on their transcript. It doesn't go into their GPA. It's like a do-over. And before the pandemic, our process was to just exclude these grades because they were like, they never happened. And we only had about 50 or so a semester out of 30,000 grades. Then the pandemic came and we implemented a process college-wide that said, if you drop a class during this pandemic, we're just going to give you an EW. You don't even have to ask for it. You drop it, you've got an EW, which was really great for students, but not great for our data. So all of a sudden, we didn't have any withdrawals. We had all excused withdrawals, which were basically being thrown out of our data, and our success and retention rates were through the roof. And people were calling us saying, what is going on? Why is success going up in a pandemic? That's not what I'm seeing in my classroom. And it was a whole thing. So our solution was to allow the users to see data both with the EWs in the data, so it would look kind of more like a typical semester, or they could exclude them, and so they could see the data both ways. So that's why we're doing what we're about to do. So we're going to build a toggle to allow that functionality. And I want to show you now, so where I learned how to do this is by this blog post by Ryan Sleeper. It goes through a ton of the logic behind it. It will walk you through it. So if you don't get it through this tutorial, I would highly recommend checking out this blog post for some extra tips on how to accomplish this. But essentially what we're doing is we're going to build a viz that looks like a button. So to do that, we first need to build out a parameter. So again, I've already built the toggle parameter in here, but I'm going to show you how I did it. So we're going to build it a little bit different way than I did the academic year one. We're going to go up to this little caret right here, and we're going to go to create parameter. And we'll just call this toggle right now. And we're going to change the data type. basically we're including and excluding something. So we're only going to have two values. We're going to have a true or a false. So I'm going to change the data type to Boolean, which is what gives you those true false values. And I'm going to change the alias because there's going to be some logic in here and my brain's going to get confused. And so if I don't alias these, I'm going to get super confused. So if we say true is include and false is exclude, that'll just help keep track of everything once we start building it out. So that's basically all there is for the parameter. I'm not going to save it because we've already created it here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to build a calculated field to control our button. So what we're going to have to tell Tableau is when the user clicks the button, this is what I want you to do. So that's what we're doing with this field. So we'll call it toggle button. And what I'm going to say is if that toggle parameter is set to true, so if our grades are included, then, and what I like to say in my head is, then when the user clicks that button, flip it to false. That's basically what this logic is saying. Otherwise, if that toggle parameter equals false, then when the user clicks it, flip it to true. And that's really all this is saying. This is what's allowing that toggle to switch back and forth between looking like it's turned on and turned off. So we're going to click OK. And we're going to change our mark type to shape. And we're going to pull that field that we just created and we're going to put it onto shape. And let's make it bigger. And so you can see it. And I'll show you the parameter over here. So when we throw that onto shape, Tableau is just going to use default shapes for include and exclude, right? We're just getting a circle and a square. So what I did was, again, using PowerPoint, I just created a couple toggle buttons. So I used a rounded rectangle, made the edges super round, drew on a circle, and then I added, the check mark and the X mark. Again, saved them as a picture, and then that was it. I saved those pictures to the Tableau repository, so they were available to use in a shape. So nothing super fancy. So we'll go into shapes. Oops. And we'll go down to toggles. You can see I've got a couple here because I use these a lot. And we have false over here, and your inclination is going to be to set this to the X to show that it's off. But that's why I recommend aliasing your parameter, because if you look over here, you can see that we're actually set to include. So we want to include the EWs here. We want it to look like they're included. So we're going to use the little teal check mark. And we're going to hit OK. We're going to do the same thing for exclude. We're going to change that toggle. And this time we're going to use that little gray check mark. So now it looks like if our parameter, if our EWs are included, we've got the little check. And if they're excluded, we have the little X mark. I'm also going to do what I did before. I'm going to add those dummy variables onto detail because we want to take out that shading that Tableau does. And I'm going to turn the tooltips off. The one thing about this, I think the hardest part of this specific type of using a parameter like this is actually the filter you have to put onto the other sheets. So I'm going to show you, I've already put the filter on, but I'm going to show you how it's built out because it's a little bit confusing. And I think it'll be helpful if you see what we're doing. So we basically need to create a field that's going to filter out the EWs if they are excluded and keep them if they're included. So I'm going to create another calculated field. And if we think about this in steps, basically what we're doing is, what we want to say is if my grade equals EW, then I want it to be excluded. Otherwise, I just want to use the grade like it is. And so I'm going to apply this and show you what this is going to do. So basically what I've done is I've just created a fake value for EWs that's exclude, but it isn't tied to our parameter. So you can see over here as I change this to include, that's not doing anything because we haven't told Tableau, hey, we only want this to be true if we're excluding that grade. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say, only do this if my toggle parameter equals false. Otherwise, if it's true, just use the grade. And this is the field that's on our all the other vises as a filter. And so now what you see, I just applied it. When we change this back to include, our EWs just look like EWs. And so if we put this on as a filter, you're going to see I've got all of these grades and I've got my excludes for my EWs. I'm going to click that and I'm going to exclude the exclude. We're going to hit OK. And now you can see EWs are going to jump in and out of our data depending on what's selected by the parameter. And this, again, I feel like this is the most difficult part of including and excluding a variable is actually creating that filter. The parameter itself is not that hard. It's the logic that goes into this filter. And you can see I've got this on all of the visits so that it will impact the dashboard. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, we can chat about it in breakout rooms. And so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring that toggle onto the dashboard. We're going to hide the title and then we'll make the background color transparent. And we'll just resize it to go up here. Oops. And we'll take out all those extra things that we just got from our dashboard. And then we're going to build out the same thing we did before with the parameter action and then that filter action to take out the highlight. So we'll go to actions. We'll add the parameter action and we'll call this select toggle. And again, we only want the toggle sheet. That's the source sheet. That's the sheet we just built. And it's what's going to run the parameter. And we want it on select. The target parameter is that toggle parameter. The source field is that toggle button that we created. And we'll hit OK. And I want to show you this. So the highlight issue that we saw with the drop-down menu is even more problematic for the toggle button because it actually forces you to hit the toggle twice. You can see it's getting this little highlight around it. If I click it once, it takes it off. And then I click it again, and that's what's bringing it back. So it's even more problematic. You don't want functionality where a user has to click something twice, right? You only want them to do it once. So this filter action is especially important for the toggle switch. And we'll call this select toggle. So again, we'll just select the toggle as our source sheet. It's going to run on select. If the target sheet is just the toggle sheet, make sure we're showing all values so we don't get everything disappearing on us. And the selected fields are those two dummy variables that we created. And now you just click it one time and EWs come in and out of our data. And if you pay attention down here to the grade distribution, you can see that they're actually jumping in and out depending on whether or not the toggle is set to include or exclude. So at this point, this is where we're going to turn it over to you all and to do the hands-on piece, which is building this side panel navigation. So you're going to build out a viz. So the steps are the same. You'll build a source sheet that looks like this, right? You'll build out basically a text. Well, I don't want to give too many hints. You'll build out a viz that looks like this, and then you'll have to bring in a parameter action to basically affect the visual. Again, I've already put, well, that's not a good example. I've already put a field on all of the vizzes that are controlled by the success and retention parameter. If you look at the field, it's just swapping out success and retention rate, and that's what's on our marks here. So it's already wired to affect all of the visuals. You just have to build out the actual UI piece and then wire it up on the dashboard. And before we jump into breakouts and everything, I think we want to check in on questions and kind of wrap up to see if there are any questions or whatnot before ending.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. That was an awesome presentation. Super excited to circle back to this when you have to, build out this functionality on a dashboard. Just a reminder, this will be recorded, so it will be accessible at any time to come back and touch base on the things that Lisa covered. For the next few steps, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and from the breakout rooms, that will close out our session. So just wanted to open it up for any questions with the broader group right now. And then Lisa will be jumping between breakout rooms for any specific questions that come up. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or just unmute yourself and fire away.